Record.
Smart Business Account for SMEs. Being a business owner is a role that changes constantly. At JMMB Bank, we offer a new type of partnership. We understand and care about the unique needs that come with operating a small or medium-sized business by offering flexibility, partnership, and expert advice to support your successful growth. For you, we've created the JMMB Smart Business Account. The JMMB Smart Business Account is an interest-bearing checking account for registered businesses with an annual revenue of under $450 million, or US dollar equivalent, which gives you the opportunity to maximize the value of every dollar earned. The benefits? No nuisance fees. Never have to deal with monthly service fees, account dormancy fees, and minimum monthly balance requirements. Easy payments. Enjoy free bill payment and free inter- and intra-bank automated clearinghouse ACH transfers within Jamaica. Interest accumulation. Earn interest and grow your company's money over time. Interest is calculated daily and paid monthly. One free manager's check per month. Check leaves available upon request, or ask about our special pay-as-you-go check feature. Speak to a JMMB Bank representative today to see how the JMMB Smart Business Account, along with our Small Business Loan Solutions and SME Resource Center, can support you in growing your business. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn at JMMB Group, or visit our website, jm.jmmb.com. JMMB SME Resource Center, a partnership that goes above and beyond. Because you need more than just a bank, we are committed to offering support and guidance to small and medium-sized businesses, or SMEs, every step of the way. The JMMB SME Resource Center ensures that you are prepared to access JMMB's banking, investment, and insurance brokerage services, along with our business planning expertise. The center provides customized advice to take your business to the next level. The JMMB SME Resource Center will help you to identify financial opportunities, develop a professional business plan, structure financial statements, and solve business challenges with the help of our network of business partners. Are you ready to grow your SME with JMMB? Speak to one of our JMMB SME representatives to find out how we can partner with you. Follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at JMMB Group, or visit our website at jm.jmmb.com.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another one of our JMMB SME Resource Center workshop. How is everyone feeling this evening? I hope you're all eager to hear tonight's topic. Okay. Well, I am definitely happy to be here. I am feeling very blessed that I'm able to share this amazing topic with you guys, the Jamaica Data Protection Act. And tonight we are going to be discussing how it's going to impact your business and what it is that you need to know. So this law was actually passed in 2020, and it's going to take effect November of this year. So we want you to make sure that you are ready and you know what you need to do to be ready for November 2023. So apart from our amazing workshops, because we do workshop on topics that we know will impact your business. Apart from that, the Resource Center, for those of you who are new, we do so much more. We pride ourselves on being your partners. We want to make sure that we are able to see you grow. I know that tonight we have with us a lot of SMEs. We want to see you transition out of that SME bracket. And for us, that means being your partner. And it's doing this, we want to ensure that we provide you with the necessary tools to help you to achieve this. So our workshop is one such tool. Outside of that, we offer things like our business templates, access to a network of other business persons where you can develop relationships. We're very big on establishing business relationships. We have our need discovery assessment, which we use to help us to guide you, discover what it is that your goals are, how it is that you're going to achieve those goals, and what we need to do to implement the strategies to help you to achieve those goals. So those are some of these ways that the Resource Center helps you. As the name suggests, we provide you with a resource school. But our solutions don't just stop at JMMB. We also offer solutions to our partners. So we have persons, professionals in areas such as marketing, HR, accounting, and these are persons who do well in their field, and we want them to be able to assist our clients. And when you are a JMMB SME Resource Center, you benefit from these connections, not just from getting quality service, but also by getting a discount on the service. So if it is that you are an existing JMMB SME Resource Center and you have a need that you need assistance with, would love if you would reach out to us. If it is that you're not an existing Resource Center client, feel free to send us an email, JMMB SME Resource Center at JMMB, and we will definitely be happy to assist you. And I want to speak specifically tonight about one of the solutions that we offer to our clients. This is something that our clients have been asking for quite a while, and it is now here. I'm not sure if everybody is aware that JMMB now has our point of sale machine. And not only do we have the physical machine that most persons are familiar with, but we also have a QR code option. So this is very useful for persons who have like an online store. You can send your QR code via email, or you can have your customer scan it. And our mobile machine, one of the fabulous features of it is that you don't need an internet connection. You don't need to connect to a Wi-Fi connection. It has its own chip, so you can literally take the machine anywhere.
Yeah, I like that.
So you can take it anywhere with you that you want. So if you are interested, please send us an email. I'm sure, just like, who was that said wow?
That was me, because trust me, whenever I go to this machine that I have now, if I don't have Wi-Fi problem, I have data problem, stress, cold sweat, everything.
Okay, awesome. I'm sure that once you accept our machine, that you'll have the same experience or the same expression as Miss Price. You will be wowed. So that's what the Resource Center does. Before we get into our main activity for tonight, the very important topic of making sure that you are compliant for the law, my team member Latoya is going to take us through a very quick activity just to get us our blood flowing and to get us ready to have a very interactive night. So I'm going to hand over to Latoya now.
Thank you, Tanis. Good evening, everyone. All right. So we are going to do a small little game. It's a data game. Give me a second. So, all right, so the main topic for tonight is, or the topic for tonight is data privacy and data protection. So anybody just can raise your hand, or you can say it in the chat, or you can feel free to open your mic and say something. But tell me, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you see this picture? What's the first thing that jumps out at you when you see this picture? Anybody?
Protection of your customers' information.
Okay, can you be more specific on that one? Let me give me a little more details on that one.
Okay, so basically, I would say, how does a company protect my name, address, my banking details, etc.?
There we go. Okay, good. Anybody else want to share? Let me check the chats. In the chat. No other feedbacks?
I'm seeing cloud activity. I'm seeing on-premise activity with the large hard drive there. So I'm figuring your data protection is not only for on-premise, but cloud as well.
Exactly. Good. That's a good one. That's a very good one. So you notice you've seen a lot of different a lot. So you see the hard drive, you see up the top there is a notes, there's the email, you have the clouds up the top, the music, you have the gallery, your photo gallery, the music, your files, everything all in one. And all of those put together is all of just as your data, right? And we need to protect those at all costs. So let's move on to the other picture. All right, what jump out at your mind when you see this one? What are you thinking? Anybody?
It brings to mind encryption.
Yes.
Yeah, when I see the
This one
lock.
is easy. Yeah, this one is pretty easy. This one is pretty easy, and that's exactly what it does. That's exactly what it brings about, encryption. And the final one, what about this one? What jumps out at you guys?
My bank seems like banking transactions are also secure.
Anything else?
Keeping you safe from scammers.
There you go. So there is a type of verification going on here, right? So right over the corner, you see where they have the fingerprint, you have to verify information to get access. Anything else jump out?
Maybe in regards to online transactions, I'm seeing the bank card.
There you go. Good. Yeah. So good. So you guys are all smart because you guys are getting everything right. So that's exactly what tonight is about. Tonight is about learning about data protection and learning about data privacy and how to be data compliant. So after today, we're also going to learn about the Jamaica Data Protection Act, which, as Tani said earlier, that will come in effect in November of 2023. So we want you guys to be able to have an idea of what it's like and get the ball rolling before it actually happens in November 2023. And we have two presenters tonight that's going to give us knowledge, a lot more knowledge than we actually know, to help us in protecting our business, protecting our suppliers, protecting our employees, all our business information. And our first presenter will be Mr. Russell Cooper. Mr. Russell, he's an attorney at law. He holds a bachelor degree of the University of the West Indies, as well as a legal education certificate from the Norman Manley's Law School. He hones his expertise to become a trusted advisor in navigating the legal intricacies of data protection regulations. He represents a diverse range of clients, including corporations, small businesses, and individuals in complex and civil commercial disputes. And our second presenter will be Mr. Abraham Lindo, who has 15 years of experience in the information technology, education, and insurance field. He has acquired in-depth knowledge of the corporate and operational planning, risk management, and has demonstrated expertise in conducting projects. And he's also passionate about using his expertise to help businesses protect themselves from cyber threats. So we are in very good hands. So please help me welcome our two presenters, Mr. Russell and Abraham Lindo.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Russell Cooper. Thank you for that introduction, Latoya. So I guess we can go right into the presentation, but before we start, I'd like to ask, how many of you here have ever heard of the Data Protection Act? By a show of hands, you just put up your hand in the chat, or in the participants there? I see one hand. Chemo.
Can I repeat that question because you're kind of low, please? Thanks.
Oh, I was asking how many of you here have ever heard of the Data Protection Act, the Jamaican Data Protection Act? I'm seeing Nordia and Chemo, Romario Ferran, yes. So quite a few of us have heard about the act. Now, my second question is this. How many of you have heard about the data breach that happened to Mayberry recently, very recently? You can put up your hand for that one. So that was in the papers, right? Some information, some very private information got leaked from Mayberry, and now they're in a tizzy. So this afternoon, we're going to be speaking to you all on how to prevent that from happening to your organization. So I'm going to share my screen here. You can let me know if you see it. All right. And we're just going to start out. The Jamaica Data Protection Act, what companies need to know. Now, we're going to have this discussion mainly from the angle of companies and not necessarily data subjects, which are individuals or persons who would be protected under the Act. Now, what exactly is the need for data protection and privacy? I know a lot of you might be wondering, why all this hullabaloo? Why all of a sudden has Jamaica come up with this new legislation that's going to cost us money to be compliant and all of these things? Now, you have to remember, though, that the world as we know it is changing. It is becoming more digitalized. More data is passing through social media and through other avenues. And I will start by using a quote from the British mathematician Clive Humbley, who said, "Data is the new oil." When he said that, what he meant is, like oil, data isn't useful in its raw state. It needs to be refined, processed, and turned into something useful. That is where the value lies in its potential. Now, companies will be processing a lot of data under the Data Protection Act. And in that processing, the data, as you can see on the slide, the data protection and data privacy are becoming more relevant in day-to-day operations. This might just mean regular transactions, credit card transactions. You collect customer data to send out emails, to distribute marketing materials. Things like these are becoming more and more common. We already see that the European Union or the EU has had a more direct approach to consumer privacy rights in the implementation of the GDPR, which is some legislation that was passed a long time ago in the European Union, right? Our own act was passed in 2020, as we heard earlier, and the Information Commissioner, who is a regulatory body for data protection, came into office in December 2021. So now businesses were given a certain period in which to become compliant with the process, and that period is quickly coming to an end, right? As you can see from the slide, the compliance deadline is November 30th, 2023, which is very urgent, or very soon, I should say. So what does that mean for you and me? What does that mean for companies, right? So what it would mean is that on the 1st of December, 2023, we must ensure that we are compliant with the legislation. You know, it also means that businesses will have to submit records of data processing every year to the regulatory body, which is the Information Commissioner. And this would have to be done between January and March of every year. So it's an ongoing process, much like compliance, anti-AML compliance with the FSC or the BOJ. This is now another regulatory requirement, right? So the Act really speaks to specific requirements for the handling of the personal data that you will be, that companies will be handling. And it outlines as well specific obligations whereby businesses would need to abide by in the event of a certain data breach, which we will discuss in the coming slides. Now you might be hearing all of this and be feeling like Kermit here. You want to jump off of a building, but have no fear. We're gonna go through it. We're gonna go through it together, and we're gonna come to how we can be compliant with the Act. Now, let's start by simply defining the Act. Now, it's our new privacy. One second.
Nadia, do you have a question? She's had her hand up for quite a while.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Nadia.
No.
No.
All right, so you can go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. Right, so we can start off by simply defining the Act. So it's Jamaica's new privacy law, which models very closely the GDPR. In fact, a lot of the elements of the GDPR have been taken and molded into our new privacy legislation. And by following closely what companies do to comply with GDPR, we can also become compliant with our local Data Protection Act. That's how closely that the legislations have been modeled. So what it does is it really creates a set of compliance obligations for which all companies have to comply with, right? Now, we can go on to who exactly has to comply. We've been talking about companies, right? So under the Act, companies would be classified as data controllers, and data controllers are defined as any person or public authority who either alone or jointly is in common with other persons determines the purposes for which and the manner in which any personal data are to be processed, and where personal data is processed only for purposes for which they are required under the enactment to be processed. The person on whom the obligation to process the personal data is imposed by or under that enactment is for the purposes of this Act a data controller. Now that's a mouthful, right? Essentially, what the legislation is saying is that companies that dictate how data is processed, how personal data is processed, will be considered data controllers. Processing means the receipt and movement or change or analysis of personal data. So even if you hold data very briefly for your customers, you could be considered as processing it, and you would be a data controller under the Act. Now, it doesn't matter if you're for-profit or non-profit, or if you're incorporated in Jamaica or outside of Jamaica, you would be considered a data controller under the Act, right? And this really serves to protect personal data or data subjects rather in Jamaica, because a lot of persons would have had the opinion that if you are a company incorporated outside of Jamaica, that you would not have to abide by the Act, but this is not true. You would still have to comply. Now, let's look at what businesses have to do to comply with the Act, right? So, as a data controller, you can also be a data processor, or you have data processors separate from data controllers in some instances. For example, these would be entities that collect personal information from an individual or a Jamaican or simply anyone who resides in Jamaica and processes the personal information on behalf of a third party. So these persons, these data processors might not necessarily be data controllers, but they would process data. You can think of companies like data centers that store data or that sell data. Google, for example, some of these other companies, they only intake some data. They don't hold it necessarily, but it passes through their organization or through their company. And in that regard, they would be considered data processors under the Act. Now, there is no revenue threshold for compliance. We have to remember that. It's important to remember that, because it doesn't matter how little money you make or how much money you make, you are still required to comply with the Act. There's also no maximum or minimum threshold of users or data subjects. As long as you process data for one individual, you have to comply with this Act, right? So the Act doesn't differentiate between data activities that are paper-based or digital. So we know that a lot of companies in Jamaica are still paper-based in their data You go to a company, they ask you for your TRN or whatever to put you on a mailing list, they might write it in a book. Or you might have gone to the supermarket, maybe use your card, and you see them pull out a little book and write down some information based on the card transaction. That is personal data. That is under the jurisdiction of the Act. So it doesn't matter whether the information is digital or if it's paper-based, we still have to remain compliant. Now, we can go into some more definitions. What is personal information or personal data? Now, very simply, any information that a business entity collects about an individual that would lead to the identification of that individual is considered personal data. Some examples of personal data would include names, email addresses, phone numbers, transaction information, TRNs, driver's license, age, and gender. The Act also goes on to explain that biometric data would be also considered personal data. So fingerprints, DNA samples, things like that. Health data is also considered personal data. So hospitals would have to look out for that information pertaining to illness that can be traced back to an individual can be considered personal data. So at this time, I want to ask another question, and just to see if you guys are thinking. Would a tweet be considered personal data under the Act? Would a tweet, if Russell Cooper tweeted something on Twitter and a company took that tweet and did something to it, would it be considered personal data? Any responses? I see Kenisha Alex says yes. Anybody else? Anybody else wants to take a try? Nordia says no. Kima says no. Not if you are not asking for personal identifiable information, says Abigail. Lionel says no. All caps. All right, I like that you guys are listening. Miguel says no. However, I would like to inform you that if Russell Cooper can be identified from the tweet, then it constitutes personal data. Remember what the definition is: any information that a business entity collects about an individual that would lead to the identification of that individual is classified as personal data. So if you can identify me from my tweet, right, then it would be considered personal data and under the jurisdiction of the Act. So you see how serious this Act is, guys. A very serious Act. In fact, not to go on an aside, but the Act also speaks about, or the Act also points to, I should say, CCTV footage, right? So images, video images, picture images. If you have CCTV cameras around your house, around your business, and you're video recording persons' faces, that is considered personal data, right? So as Nordia asks, even if you put information out there for the public to see, yes, it would still be considered personal data. It would still be considered personal data in those circumstances. So I also saw an earlier question in the chat. I'm just reading chat now. I'm so sorry. Kima says, what if Google chooses not to comply? What if I have an Instagram store and just collect phone numbers to WhatsApp? Do I need to comply? Yes, you would. If those phone numbers, if persons can be identified from those phone numbers, then you would need to comply. And as we get down into the presentation, you will see ways in which you can comply that will minimize your exposure, right? So it's very important to remember the definitions that we have here. So yes, if Google chooses not to comply, Kim, I can't really answer that question. I'm not sure. I'm not the information commissioner. That the government and Google will have to fight that one out. But yes, if you collect WhatsApp numbers, you would have to comply. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. So we're gonna move on to the rights of data subjects under the Act. Now, the data subjects have a number of rights under the Act. some of which is the right to know if any of their personal data is being processed, how it is being processed, for what purpose it is being processed, and who will it be disclosed to, any third parties. That is all right under the Act. You also have the right to receive a copy of your personal data. You also have the right to be compensated for damage or distress resulting from data controllers. I'm so sorry, resulting from data controllers contravening the Data Protection Act, right? So those are some of the rights that data subjects have. I just want to touch on some other rights that that we have. We have the right to rectification, which means that if a data controller has incorrectly recorded your information, you have the right for that information to be correct. So if you go to courts and you're pulling out a higher purchase loan on a city, and your name is Russell and I'm spelled Russell with one L, you have the right for that to be corrected, right? So stuff like that. You have the right to refuse digital marketing, right? You have the right to prevent data controllers from using your data to market digitally to you. That is a specific right. So you see all those emails that you get from, those spam emails that you might get from JPS or NTV, where they're trying to sell you something. You have the right to prevent NTV from sending you those emails, or from using your data to send you those emails, right? One interesting right I want to point out that does not exist in the Jamaica Data Protection Act, but it does exist in the GDPR, is the right to erasure, or the right to be forgotten. Under the GDPR, subjects have the right for their data to be erased or to be deleted. We do not enjoy that right in Jamaica. So just keep that in mind as one of the things that, one of the rights that we don't necessarily get out here, not yet at least. All right, so we can move on. So what is required from entities under the Act? So we have a few things that entities are required to do. So they're required to register with the regulator, which is the Office of the Information Commissioner. They're required to appoint a data protection officer. They are required to conduct and submit annual data protection impact assessments, which is a sort of regulatory tool to measure how your data how the data, the personal data that you are processing, how it can be impacted. You are required to, of course, process data in accordance with the 8 data protection standards prescribed by the Act. Now, we're going to go into those 8 data protection standards in just a moment. So the first one is that data should be processed for a fair and lawful reasoning. So personal data should be processed fairly and lawfully under certain conditions, including consent. So consent is very important in fair and lawful processing of personal data. I don't know if you've ever been downloading software, or if you've went on a website and a pop-up box suddenly comes up on your screen with terms and conditions or a privacy statement, and you just scroll to the bottom and click I accept. You don't even bother to read it. Well, that plays into consent, right? Under the Jamaica Data Protection Act, data controllers have to ensure unequivocally that they have received the consent of the data subject for their data to be processed. So this means that privacy statements, terms of use, those policies on websites and on software, those have to be clear and about how data is being processed, and allow the data subject to give their consent. If the data subject does not understand for what purpose their data is being processed, then they cannot be said to have given consent, right? So that is an important thing to note. Second standard is what we call purpose limitation. So the processing of personal data must be for specific and lawful purposes. This means that data must be obtained for one or more specific purposes. So you cannot collect data for one purpose and use it for another. In your terms of service or your privacy statement, you cannot tell people, yeah, man, we're gonna collect your data to just to send you marketing emails. We're just gonna JMMB cannot say we're gonna collect your data just to send you marketing emails and credit card stuff. Try to sell your credit card and then turn around and sell your data to Microsoft and sell your data to Google. Right? That would not be specific and lawful purpose because you've told the data subject that you're gonna do one thing with the data and then do something completely different with it. So it must be for a specific and lawful purpose. All right, number 3 is what we call data minimization. So now data minimization really means that any personal data to be processed or that is being processed must be adequate, relevant, and limited to what is necessary for the purpose. So if you don't need to collect all that data, don't collect all that data. Sometimes you might go to retail stores and they want everything. They want your phone number, your email address, your mother maiden name, right? Where you're born, what color is your car, all of that data. For what? You don't need all that data. So data minimization would mean that you only collect data for what you need. So if you're gonna collect data for the purpose of marketing, you would only collect, say, an email address because you don't need date of birth to send marketing information. All you would need is an email address, right? So you minimize the data that you collect so you don't fall out of compliance with the act. So that is one way in which you can protect yourself, is by collecting just the amount of data that you need. So number 4 is accuracy. Data controllers must ensure that the personal data that they collect and process is accurate and up to date, right? So if you're going to collect personal data, you have to ensure that it is accurate and up to date. Cannot be inaccurate, cannot be wrong, a letter off, has to be accurate. Number 5 is what we call storage limitation, right? Which essentially means that as soon as a personal data is no longer necessary, it must be properly disposed of or destroyed. So as a data controller, you cannot collect information and keep it forever in your database. Because if you've used it for a specific purpose or for the purpose of which it was collected, and you have no further use for it, then you have to destroy it, right? So that is essentially what the storage limitation means. Number 6 is compliance. So processing of personal data must also be in accordance with the data subject's rights, which we have stated earlier, and it must also be in accordance with the act. So that is essentially compliance. Number 7 is security, which just means that data controllers must ensure that appropriate technical and organizational measures are in place to properly process personal data. So this would mean your policies, your software, what software are you using, encryption, right? CyberSyce can definitely help you with some of those organizational measures to protect your personal data, right? So you can ask Abraham or myself about that later down. Now, the last one has to do with data transfer. And this means that personal data in the possession of data controllers should not be transferred outside of Jamaica without the receiving territory also having adequate protection, right? So it would mean that you're not allowed to transfer data outside of the territory unless the territory in which is receiving the personal data has their own data protection regime. And that data protection regime must be held to be adequate. It cannot be as Jamaicans say. It has to be robust. For example, the GDPR, of course, would be considered a robust regime. The United States has their own regime as well. So when transferring outside of jurisdiction, it just has to be a robust regime that you transfer to. So we're down to
one second. Andrea is asking what would constitute inadequate.
Oh, what would constitute adequacy? Okay, so At the present moment, the framework or the guidance notes as it relates to adequacy of the regime would have to come from the Information Commissioner, because the regulator would be the one to assess other regimes and create a sort of blacklist by which data controllers can abide by. So it's quite similar to like the FATF gray list that Jamaican banks are on. You know, you're on the gray list, or you're on the blacklist, or you're on the white list. So that is really in the jurisdiction of the Information Commissioner to determine what jurisdictions would constitute robust in their data protection regimes. I hope that answers your question, Andrea. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, you're speaking a bit too quietly. Can you lift your voice?
Oh, I'm speaking quietly.
I said, you need to lift your voice. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm quite soft-spoken by nature. Okay, so it seems I've answered Andrea's question. All right, so we're gonna move on now to enforcement of the Jamaica Data Protection Act. And of course, as we mentioned, enforcement would be done by the regulator. Now, what will DPA enforcement look like? Now, of course, the regulator is tasked with that. I see a question from Damien. I'm just going to pause. Is it safe to say that countries aligned with the European standard for GDPR would be safe? I would say so, Damien, largely because our Data Protection Act is greatly modeled off of that legislation or that regulation. So countries that do align with the European standard, I think, would be safe. Of course, I am not the Information Commissioner, but I am just speaking based on what the climate looks like and how the legislation was drafted. It would appear that they would be safe. Yes, I would say yes to that question. Right. So of course, the Information Commissioner is responsible for enforcement, and the Information Commissioner has a range of powers. I mean, she can ask random businesses to provide certain information or to prove their compliance policies and procedures. In fact, she has specific methods by which she does that. I say she because the Information Commissioner is a she right now. But the office has specific methods in which they can do that. She can issue an information notice, which is a notice that requires companies to outline what kind of, or furnish the Information Commissioner with specified information or categories of information, right? She can also issue an assessment notice, which requires companies to provide indication that they have complied with or are complying with the data protection standards that we had listed previously, the 8 standards. And she can issue an enforcement notice. Now, an enforcement notice would be a notice requiring a data controller or company to comply with one of the data protection standards that we had listed. So you have information where she asks for specific information or data. She has assessment where she comes in and assesses your compliance, if you're up to speed, if you're doing well. And she has enforcement in which she compels you to comply with one of the standards. So those are 3 of the notices that the Information Commissioner can issue, right? So grievances by data subjects can be reported to the IC, and she will of course make a deliberation based on that. And of course, the IC can also advise businesses to stop processing data of Jamaican citizens if issues are found during an investigation process, or if issues are reported. So those are that's what enforcement will look like come November of this year or December, right? So we're going on to consequences of non-compliance now. So some of the penalties that businesses or data controllers can face are fines. And the Act outlines that businesses can be fined up to 4% of their annual gross worldwide turnover for the preceding year. 4% of their annual gross worldwide turnover, right? So this is not a play thing that the IC is coming with, right? Personal liability. Owners, directors, and officers can be held personally liable, right? So if you're a director, senior officer of a company or an owner, you yourself can be held personally liable if it is found that you were negligent or that you acquiesced to breaches of the Data Protection Act or breaches of the data protection standard. So you as a director, owner, senior officer, you have to ensure that your company is strictly abiding by these principles or by these guidelines, or you can be held liable, right? It says individuals can be fined up to 5 million JMD and can face imprisonment of up to 10 years. We don't want any of that to happen to any of you, right? So we need to ensure that we're up to speed. And then, of course, you have civil action. So data subjects can bring civil lawsuits against data controllers. They can sue them. And there is no way to quantify, right now at least, because we don't have any case law on it, there's no way to quantify what those damages will be or can be. You'd only have to suffer from it to find out, and we don't want that to happen either. So those are some of the penalties that can happen. And I just want to bring up these takeaways now that you guys can go home, meditate on, and mull over. So we need to remember that one, entities will have to go through their own data compliance process to ensure adherence, right? It's your responsibility, it's no one else's. Consumers or customers and data subjects will now have legal grounds to launch civil lawsuits for any non-compliance actions relating to data held by companies. So you can be sued. This is another way people can sue you, right? Outside of negligence, they can sue you for breach of the Data Protection Act, right? Adherence to the act is vital, right? Given the perceived brand value of companies in the local and international markets. If you want to step up internationally, a lot of other companies want to see that you have a robust data protection regime or that you have robust data protection guidelines, right? The danger of even being deemed as non-compliant relating to this act from both a customer or government angle could have serious implications for your brand, not just the civil or compliance dangers, right? So you don't want to be that company in the news. Cough, cough. You don't want to be that company in the news that has suffered from a data breach. You don't want to be any of those companies. You don't want to be, I'm not going to call any names, but you don't want to be those companies, right? You want to be the company that is compliant with the act. So more takeaways, entities will have to go through their own data compliance process to ensure, and oh, it's the same slide, right? So that's essentially some of the takeaways that I wanted to share with you all. I have a question from Andrea. So we will be relying on companies to report that they've been hacked to the government and their customers. I'm not sure I understand your question, Andrea. Are you saying that as data subjects, we have to rely on companies to report that they've had a breach?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I want to know. Like, as a customer, how will I know that my data has been compromised? Right now, we have no idea.
Right. Well, the act stipulates that within 72 hours of a breach, the company or the data controller has to report to the information commissioner about that breach. And then they have to report to their consumers. So essentially, you do have to rely on them in a way. But if it is found that they have not complied with that requirement to report the breach within the required time, then you have recourse in civil lawsuit. And the information commissioner will also have their way with that company. So yes, we have to rely on them, or you don't necessarily have to rely. I mean, if you want to do regular data checks, you can request that information. But in the event of a breach, it is the responsibility of the data controller to report it to the information commissioner and their customers within the requisite time under the act, which is 72 hours, I believe. Yes. So
Okay.
that answers your...
I have a question. Yes? Yeah.
Sure.
I'm from the UK. I've lived with data protection for decades, and Jamaica is just catching up. My issue here is that how is Jamaica going to make accountability is what's missing, I find, with a lot of organizations, and simple things, driving on the road, how things are checked. So first of all, we all have different industries. So there has to be, if the government wants us to have this all done by November, there has to be much more assistance out there to help all these different industries. So I'm in real estate, I have to collect personal information, and I do handle my personal information correctly because that's something I know. So as soon as somebody's filled out a really detailed form and it's no longer required, I shred. That's just what we do in our office.
That's
However,
good practice, yes.
Everybody doesn't do that, and you don't know. And I don't give up my information. You're like, you go into a shop and say, I went to a dry cleaners the other day and asked me for my name, my email. I said, no, simple, right? Because that's the word I come from. But we don't have accountability here enough. We'll have the act, we'll do something for a while, and then suddenly it drops off. How are we going to do this? It's finding people $5 million and 10 years imprisonment is not the way to encourage people to do this thing correctly. You're going to always have data breaches. You even had data breaches in the UK just recently, and we've had data protection for years and years and years. So how are you going to help people? Not you, obviously. How is the government going to help people?
Well, we can help people, Paulette.
I know, not speaking you to do, because you're the attorney, right? So there has to be, to get people on board, there has to be a lot more help. So there should be some templates set up already through the commission so that people can say, right, I'm in real estate, or I'm in marketing, or I'm in whatever. If that's not, then you're just going to leave people to do this thing. It's not going to get done. It's not going to get done. People are going to be afraid. People are not going to report. If people are not going to report that something has gone wrong, they're going to say, I'm afraid, because in Jamaica, people don't complain like that. They complain amongst their friends. So we have to, even though it's modeled off the UK system, we have to understand that the Caribbean is a different culture. So we have to do it slightly different, right? So you have to try and encourage people, not make them be afraid to do this. And I don't feel that right here. The act came in at 2020, and by November, you have to be ready. That's not helpful. That's not very helpful at all.
Yeah, and I agree with you to some extent, Paulette, because I think you've described Jamaica very, very accurately in terms of how things are done here. And what I will say is that the Information Commissioner definitely has her work cut out for her. And I will also say that I have actually seen her making strides in terms of, workshops, and she's been issuing what bulletins and those kind of guidelines in terms of things people can do to be compliant. So, but I do agree that a lot more needs to be done.
I don't think it should be a date on it first. I think they should say, right, we're going to spend the next 6 months assisting people, or 8 months, whatever, to get themselves comply with the act, and then give a date to say you need to be compliant by this time, because you're never going to get everybody to do it. They're going to be afraid. You're using fear tactics to get people to do things that are important.
Well, what's funny about that part is a lot of Jamaican people respond to fear tactics, right? So
we get more laws broken that way. And that's why I understand now why people break the laws more, because they're frightened, or there's nobody to help. Sometimes they don't know where to go. Yes, sometimes, so people do the backdoor thing. So that's not the way to do it. That's just not the way. I don't think so anyway. I might be wrong. I can't speak on behalf of the 50 people that are on this, but I just think it's the wrong way to.
I take your point, Paulette, and I really do think the IC can do a lot more in helping people to become compliant. But again, that's why we're here. That's where CyberSyce is here. We're here to help people become compliant. So, where the IC falls down, we will help persons stand up. So Yes.
For me, my take on it, I think there is a lot of bias and weirdly corruption around how it is actually being rolled out. There, as a fellow IT practitioner, I've seen where there are specific companies in Jamaica who has gotten privilege to certain information, how the act will be relevant frameworks and all of that stuff prior to what the public is. And these entities are using that and will be using that to sort of stronghold businesses into leveraging their services.
Yeah.
Being in the space, what I'm seeing is that a lot of companies, IT companies, because a lot of the act will require to rely heavily on IT to be compliant, because it's just impossible to have a human to manage your data breaches and put the necessary mitigation strategies in place. So you'll resolve back to using technology. They are using this as an opportunity to take up all their old software and technology to shove down businesses throat right now, because you have to do it. And the truth is, there are better ways. So that's one of the reasons why I like working with CyberSyce. They have a totally different approach. And we're not necessarily competitors, but we do the same thing. But I can definitely say, compared to a lot of the other vendors that are out there, CyberSyce is one of the better companies to work with.
Right. We're all about education. We're all about helping
Right.
you guys.
I love that, guys. Love that.
So, right. Thank you for that, Kibo. We appreciate that. Yeah, so I feel like that is the end of my presentation. If you have any more questions, I'm here. I can facilitate them now. If not, then I will allow Mr. Abraham Lindo to take over from me and speak to the more technical side of data protection. Mr. Lindo, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Are you hearing me clearly, loud and clear? Thank you for the thumbs up, Paulette. Wonderful, wonderful. Let me just start by sharing my screen. Let me do full screen here. All right, is everyone seeing my screen? All right, thanks again. I'm just looking on the cameras to see those facial expressions so I know where I am. Thank you, Paulette. I see the nods and so on. Thank you, Tenise. All right, so what we want to talk about, and which Russell had alluded to, and also other persons, Kimo also alluded to, is all about how do you now become compliant? And so we of a CyberSyce, what we look at is having what is called the CORO cybersecurity solution. And it's all about having all the data compliance and everything that you need in a one-shop package. Even straight off the shelf, the base compliance is there, everything that you need, not only from the GDPR, but also there are compliance, especially since we noted that the JDPA is coming right from the GDPR. And so we have instruments all there ready to make you compliant. So we're going to talk about the CORO solution. Now, before we jump right into it, we just want to have a little bit of brain teasers to get our minds into it, all right? So you can take a look, oh, 10 seconds, and then we'll just get right into it. All right, good. So what do you believe is the first one, number one? And you're free to open your mics and just
Get it.
Go ahead, Lionel.
Get it.
Get over it.
I like it. That you are
forget, because it's forget, like forget.
It's forget, and yes, exactly. It's forget it. Kimo, you got it. Forget it. All right. So number two should be a little bit easier, I hope. Yes.
Jack.
Jack in the box.
Jack in the Box. That's a close one, but it's actually Black Jack. And 3?
Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Somewhere Over the Rainbow. There you are, Paulette. And number 4?
Backdoor.
Backdoor. That's correct, Lionel. And number 5?
Read between the lines.
Read between the lines. All right. And 6. Let's go a little bit. Get a little bit
thicker than water.
Yep. Blood is thicker than water. Number 7.
I don't know.
Any takers? Number 7.
These, I don't know.
Close.
Is this?
It's actually beeline. Beeline. 8. Yeah, I see you're getting stumped here. No problem. This is actually a pun and a play on words. This is so let's work with it. We see that, what word do we see here?
Cancelled in the shape of a tick, but nothing.
Exactly, cancelled in the shape of a tick. So this is actually representing canceled check. So it's a pun. Now here's one that, let's see how many persons will be able to get.
7 Dwarfs.
This too is also a pun. No takers? This is a 8-character password. So 8-character password, and I'm not going to spend the time to explain it, but you know that Snow White is 1 plus the 7 doors, right? So 8-character password. But to get right into a little bit about our CORO solution, I want to start off by showing this sign. How many persons have ever seen a sign like this? For persons who travel on the Marcus Garvey Drive, you should see a sign like this. Persons who travel, I know that Tony to this because she travels between Montego Bay and Kingston very often, so she should see signs like this. So I see Russell. Anybody else have seen a sign like this? All right. For those of you who have seen a sign of this, where do you normally see this sign?
Industrial areas.
Right. You normally see it in industrial areas, especially areas that deals with a heavy machinery. So you'd see it at probably JPSCO, you'd see it at the power stations, you'd see it also at the bauxite company, and so on and so forth. But funny enough, every time you see this sign, there's also another sign that you would see that says safety begins with
you.
Safety begins with you. And that's what I wanted us to lead on as we get into the CORO solution. So CORO solution is all about everything that you need in a protection right off the shelf in a simple box. So CORO is not just only, and persons may look at it and you'd say, oh, it's just about protecting malware, just about protecting ransomware, phishing. No, the entire package is more than just email security. It's also about protecting data loss. It's also about endpoint protection. And it's all about getting you up to speed with compliance and protecting all your sensitive and critical data. And we talked about, a while ago, we just talked about data loss protection. And what is data loss protection? So you may see the acronym DLP. No, people, not DLC for downloadable content, no, DLP, data loss protection. So data loss protection is really about tools, system processes that is able to categorize your data so that you can best identify what is your critical data, what is the data that is sensitive that you need to be protected. Data loss protection is also about being able to ensure that this data, when being protected, is not lost. There's also not unauthorized access to this data, as well as to ensure that the data is protected and backed up when it needs to, and also to ensure that users and persons who have access to this data is compliant according to whether it be the standards, the compliance standards, or the company policies. Now, on the screen, you'd see what we call data domains, the data domains that is being protected. So we see cloud, we have email, we have endpoints, we have data. And so these are what we call the endpoints that's being protected. And it's all about being able to look at and creating that system for which you are being through automation, able to know that your data is protected, your endpoint is protected, and you are safe. So one thing I want to jump into is to give you a quick demo of the dashboard, what it looks like, and some of the little feels of what this software solution can do. So I'm going to jump right into it. All right, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, man.
Yes, we are.
Wonderful, wonderful, good. So this is, we're using a demo environment, and this simple page is called our active or action dashboard. So what is on our action dashboard? So the first thing that you notice is up here is what we will call our workspace console or our workspace panel. Then right here we have our admin panel. So it's all about defining your workspace, basically who is being protected. You also have activity logs, we also have the ticket logs, and then we also have our control panel. And the control panel is all about defining what is our critical data, what is our sensitive data, what is the things that we need to be protected on, whether, and I didn't say, but let me say it now, the CORO solution is so awesome that it also considers user behaviors. So in the sense that if you know that particular users are, having particular activities or what we call behavior, particular activities and how they manage data is maybe infringing on what the policies of the companies and maybe leading towards breaches, you can put in place protection for these things. Now, right below the panel, what we have is called the widget panel. And these widgets, we talk about the different domains, the different endpoint domains. So we have cloud apps, we have users, emails, devices, and data. Now, when we talk about devices, we're talking about endpoint devices, such as computers, servers, any kind of IT machine. And then right below that, we have our action panel, all right, which is called, which allows us to see more information about these widgets. So if you click on any one of them, we can jump into our action panel that gives us a description. And so on the widget, you would see what is the domain, and you'd see if there are any issues and what we call tickets. So any issues are any activity that is suspicious, whether anything that is causing a breach, anything that will require the system to enforce a resolution or to make corrections, or for a user to review, to make a decision. It looks on any of those things that is not or seems to not comply with the regulations. It also tells you how many issues have been looked at and resolved within a 90-day panel. And so you see the same here going across. So let's take a look at, first we have the cloud apps. And so cloud apps refers to any online solutions or any cloud environment or enterprise, sorry, that you are able to connect and you are able to watch and monitor. So for example, we have the Microsoft 365 Office and the entire suite that can be connected as a cloud app. We also have, and all the APIs that may be related to it. And so if there are any activities, and so you notice that the cloud app, there is a exclamation sign. And this exclamation sign is saying, hey, there is an issue that we need to look at. And so we are seeing that there is one suspicious activity here. So we have an action button for any issue that noted. We can click on it to resolve it. And if you wanted more details about that issue, you just simply highlight it and click on it. This would then take you to what is called the ticket log, or, we can paraphrase it as the activity, sorry, not the activity log, the ticket log. What is this issue? What happened here? And you can see what it is related to. So each ticket, it has its own defined types. So we see that there's a type here called suspected identity compromise. And so some of you may have seen this. So you may have gotten an email from JMMB, or you may have gotten an email from BNS or any such institution that says, hey, we noticed that you logged in from a different machine, or you logged in from a different IP address apart from what was registered. What's happening here? Is this really you? If it is you, then you can ignore this email. If it is not you, please. So this is, classified under the suspected identity compromise. So then we can take a look at a ticket, and you have your actions button here to determine what to do. And so we have our different activities. Then we can always jump back to our action board. So we look on Cloud Apps. Right below that, we have users. And users here is represented in a pie diagram. And so you can see how many of your total users have any issues or any tickets. And then you have those that are non-users. Now, if you want to see all your users, you can just simply click on the view, because you see right here in our demo data, we have 17 protected users, and we can just click on view to see all our users that are being protected. And then we can jump back to our actions board. All right, and then I'm going to click back on users and jump all the way down. And as you can see here, we have different issues that were generated to help make our data, our demo data, look more lifelike. So we have a different category here, suspicious exposure of critical data. And so we can always click on it again, and see that there's about 18 of them. Also, you can see those that have been resolved. We have 71 resolved suspicious exposure of data. We have 1 suspicious exposure of password. And so we can always resolve all of them. And by clicking on resolve, you actually would go straight to the ticket that has all the suspicious exposure of critical data under the users, right? So we take into consideration the domain, takes into consideration the ticket type, all by simply clicks. All right, so we're going to jump back to the action board and look at the other areas. So we have emails here. So we have emails, it's checking and seeing that everything is looking fine. There was no email phishing. There was no malware in email attachments. We also have devices, and these devices are similar to users, in which you have all the devices that are being protected. Right now we have 5. And we can continue to add users, continue to add devices, all the different devices and users you want to add to your domain. The CORO enterprise and the CORO solution is able to handle all of them. And so you can see how many devices are in breach, and then those that aren't. And then we can also see the tickets that are open, that are unresolved, and those that have been resolved. And right below that, we also have data. And then we can talk about the DPIs, which is the non-public information. And we talked about, as you said, categorizing our data. And we also have PCI, so the payment card information, credit card, debit card, all of those different cards, check numbers, so on. So we also have protected health information. So, whether or not, somebody's sick and how they're sick and if they're allergic to that and so on and so forth. Anything that we can classify as health information. And then we have also your personal identifiable information that Russell had spoken about before. And so we see this wonderful dashboard, and what controls it is from our control panel, where we can click on email and we see that we enable the malware and checking of phishing in emails. We can also quarantine emails that may have any types of attachment that we know through experience. And this is from more so technically for the, and more so the data controllers, which would be like the IT professionals and the data administrators. They will be able to have an idea of what are the things to be careful of. And so they can even quarantine emails that have certain attachments. Also, you have allow, block, and add-ins. So let's jump back to the control panel. In the same way, we can define our data. What is the data that we need to be protecting? What is the data that we need to look out for? So you can see all the definition there. We can even set up, and we talked about user behavior. So we know that if persons are, using specific keywords or certain things we want to be able to look for, we can specify to look for this, not only in emails, but also where it may show up in our attachments, where it may show up in regular documents on our computer. Because yes, the software, the CORO solution is able to check devices, right? It's able to determine what kind of settings that we need to take into consideration. So you have real-time checks on malwares or ransomware all on the machine. We can talk about backup. We can talk about enhancing the endpoint protection. We talk about also all different types of checks and balances that can be in place. You can just check them off to your devices. And so we talked about that, and so these, you set up all of these credentials. And so let's take a look at the what I will call the tickets. And I'm glad that I saw this one here that is under devices, because for any issue that may occur with a device, and you will see that different behavior will occur, or different actions can be taken depending on the type of issue and the type of device or the type of domain, the kind of data you're protecting. So you can highlight all. You can also filter through the different tickets and then determine what actions need to be made. Let me change, let's see if I can get all my devices here, right? And if I highlight, you can see that you also have actions here. So I can, right? But this is depending, as you can see, some of these, they're not. And what's interesting about the device is that this would tell you whether the device is online or not. So these are actually not online at this moment in time. But for those that were or would be, you'll be able to do a lot more actions, such as you can recheck check on the devices to see if there's any sensitive data that needs to be protected. You can rerun to make sure that there's no virus. You can recheck and see if there's any malware as such on it. Now, one of the most interesting thing and beautiful things, and what Russell alluded to, is that at any given point in time, the Data Commission can say to you, what are the systems you have in place? Well, the CORO solution will be able to show everything, which is to be able to define what are the things we have in place, what permissions, how are we monitoring our data, and how it is being handled, as you would see through the ticket resolution. Now, on top of that, there's also what is called the activity logs, which allows you to see everything that occurred on the solution. So if a certain activity was done, this is how this behavior was done, how a ticket occurred, and this is how it was handled, all that information is there. So at any given point in time, you are able to present that information to the Data Commission. So just as Russell alluded to it, that if there's a breach, how you'd want to not only protect from breaches or any future breaches, you'd want to be able to identify how it occurred, why it occurred, and then make that proper resolution to that it doesn't happen again. And the CORO solution is able to do that. Are there any questions or any thoughts before I switch back to the presentation? And that's it for the demo, unless there's something you want me to specifically show. Okay, I guess
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Paulette.
This software, would it be suitable for a company, a very small company?
Yes, it would also be suitable for a small company. What you would have to do is reach out to us, CyberSyce, and we can definitely create a package for you.
Do you pay a one-off cost or is it a monthly?
At this moment in time, we have two options. We have a monthly cost and we have an annual cost. So no, there isn't a, as I said, a one-off cost. It's really either monthly or annual.
Okay, what I'm alluding to is, is it like a lot of these software where you're paying for the rest of, if you have for 10 years, you're paying for 10 years? That's what I'm trying to find out. Or is it that it is X and you pay X, but you can pay monthly or you can pay annually? That's what I'm trying to find out.
All right, so let me see if I understand your question. You want to know if it's
subscription based.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. It is subscription.
It is subscription.
I was talking in layman terms, so everybody else could understand the question.
Yes, I realize. Yes, it is subscription based.
And the upside to that, though, Paul, is that I'm pretty sure the act will evolve over time. So you wouldn't want to buy a software that is one-off, because then nobody's going to update it if it's not subscription based. So the subscription, you're guaranteed, updates and that kind of stuff. So you're always in compliance.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, but a lot of small companies are not going to go for that. I employ one person. I wouldn't.
Well, is that or 4% of your annual? That's how it goes, right? Annual revenue.
Sorry, you're speaking to me?
Oh yeah, I think if a breach is like 4% of your annual global revenue.
Yes,
so
one
the way the pros are gone.
One of the
penalties. Yeah, but there's more. You don't have to use the software to look after your data. That's what we've been doing. We've been doing it for those of us who do it. We've been doing it for a long time on a small basis. I know.
I mean, if that's
you don't have to use software.
You see it, that's perfectly fine. The intention for the CORO solution is to be able to present all the information upfront easily without much hassle. Because, for example, as you would know, well, I'm not sure how far back the Data Commission would want to ask you how you've been keeping your data, and if something occurred, how it was handled, and so on and so forth. But for example, almost like how the Taxes Association of Jamaica does it, they can tax you for anything 7 years in the back. So the Data Commission have the right to ask you of how information is. I know for a fact it actually can ask you up to 3 years. So I don't know if it goes beyond that, but it can ask you up to information up to 3 years. The CORO solution have all of that information at the click of a button. How much manual labor, work, and time would you need to create that and present that to the office, the commissioner, within 72 hours? Because if you don't, you're gonna have to face the breach and have to deal with it. So it's as you said, it's really playing with the
pros and cons.
Pros and cons, and so you have to make the best decision in as you see it for your organization. We are just providing to you a solution, not the solution. But I will tell you this: the CORO Cyber solution is the most cost-effective one out there to date. So even if you were to go to different ones and then try to pull everything together, one that does this and one that does that, costs plus the work required to try and integrate all of them into one would be a lot more. And all we're saying is that this one platform does it easy for you at the click of a button.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
So a simple shop, a simple business, small business owner that has a shop space and has cameras to see what's going on. I understand that having the CCTV, that would entail them capturing information that needs to be protected. So how would CORO help in this situation with the CCTV solution?
All right, so for CCTV, as long as, to my understanding, once these CCTVs are connected to an NVR, network video recording, so it is handled through the network, then as they can be, based on the solution and the APIs, they will be able to be accessed and placed on the solution. If it is not currently available, they will definitely work with you to make it available. As Kimo alluded to, this solution is always changing and always updating. So therefore, your cost, what you pay now, is not going to increase. It's just going to be the one solution. Every single time they keep on adding in the solution, keep on adding data metrics so that you are better protected. So and because these are IP solutions, so once you know the IP, the MAC addresses and so on, they already can be identified, then it can be added as devices on the solution.
I have a question. In terms of like the policies and procedures that that I think is required for the data protection, does this help with that any at all?
Yes, it does. So if you recall some of the things that the Russell had alluded to, so one of the things, let me see if I can bring it up. So we talk about, so the metrics for these is in line with the JDPA and the GDPR, which talks about how personal information, payment cards, how they are handled and how they are protected. We also talked about, let me see if I can jump to it.
So basically, this already gives us the verbiage. You just need to like plug it into the policy kind of thing.
Right, that is correct. What I'm looking for, sorry. Oh, let me scroll down. Okay. So you talk about how things are enforced, how review, and let me jump here. Sorry. Here we go. So we also have the threats in terms of external in terms of what is coming in. Endpoint protections, we also talk about backups, and that is securing data and making sure that in terms of data loss and so on. We spoke about the activity logs, which talk about being able to provide reports on what is happening and so on and so forth. So as you go through these different settings, you'd see that they speak to it speaks to different portions of the JDPA. Now, if you recall, let me add this part. If you recall, when I started this presentation, I showed you that black and yellow sign and alluded to the fact that safety or security begins with you. And what it alludes to is that, and that's what the beauty of the CORO cyber solution, it also takes into consideration user behavior, because if 80% of the breaches that occur in any organization is not because of what infrastructure the company placed, but because what users did. So whether they open an email that they shouldn't, whether they answered a phishing form with their critical information, or they put a password somewhere where they shouldn't have and gave access to data that they shouldn't. These are all activities that CORO will be able to monitor and manage. Now, so I'll just, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks.
You're
Thanks.
welcome. Jerome, I see you have your hands raised. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, all right, so I'm trying to analyze all of what is being said. All right, so in my business, I wouldn't necessarily be collecting much data. Of course, CCTV would have been a definite. But one of the first questions I have that is in the forefront is some of the things you showed a while ago on your screen, the shared screen, with the real-time ransomware and so on. Some of those things would have been covered in my current antivirus protection. Would I, and this may not make any sense, but hear me out.
No,
would
go
I
ahead.
need to have?
No, go ahead.
Would I need to have both services? Because of course I'm paying for it. Is it a case where, let's say, for example, my software, my antivirus, which has whatever inside, says it can protect my data and there's a quote unquote breach, I would now need to communicate with that company. So is it the same with you, given that you're a local company? Am I making sense?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are.
And I would also add that the dynamics of your question actually can be ballooned. So I'll try to answer it piece by piece. So the first part, which is if you already have an antivirus or a malware that you think is sufficient, do I still need the CORO solution? And I would say yes. The CORO solution works with your malware and your antivirus software to be able to pinpoint what activities is happening and to be able to run tests. Now, additional to that, the CORO solution can also do additional checks and even more than whatever antivirus or malware that you may have, because it itself is has its own, and it can do its own checks to verify. And as you can expect, it will also be updating and continually update based on new activities and new protocols. I see your hand, Russell, so we'll come to you.
Continue. We are actually at our 8 o'clock mark, so I'm just going to ask. I know it's a very important topic, and we have a couple questions. I'm just going to ask permission just to maybe 6 more minutes, and then wrap it up. After that, any questions that you have, we will ensure that either Mr. Abram or Mr. Cooper can reach out to you and answer those questions. So just let me know if you're in agreement to go another 6 or so minutes.
Okay. All right, so that's the first portion of your question. Now the other portion is that even though when breaches occur, once you are so you have an option whether you want to be an administrator to be able to see your own domain, or you can ask us and CyberSyce to manage your domain, and we can provide for you regular reports. So you, as an administrator, will be able to see your domain, and when anything occur, you will be able to say, oh, this is what happened, and then you can then take it from there. So the solution is not that, oh, we're in our own space and you're in your own space and you just have to reach out to us all the time. No, we can make you an administrator for your own domain, and then we can determine what your permissions are. I hope that answers all of it.
I mean, you provide some clarity on it. Yes. I think we will have millions of questions to be asked as it reaches close to November. So yeah. But just another quick one. You're saying where do I contact you to get more information on the CORO?
All right, so I'm gonna let you speak about that. I can give it to you directly, but for time, I'm just gonna go to Russell.
Sure.
Awesome. Russell?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention very briefly that data controllers who have employees would also need to be in compliance as it relates to employee personal data. So if you collect, if you have files on your employees, you would need to have HR files on your employees. You would need to be in compliance with the act as it relates to those files as well. So just a quick tip that I wanted to point out to you guys.
Thank you. There, Mr. Edwards also has a question. Sorry. Okay. So they wanted to know if for the framework for George, PCI, etc. I'm sure you know what that means, if it comes built into the solution.
Yes, it does.
Checking if we have any more questions. And Ms. Price wanted to know how long the software has been on the market. Oh, it was answered 2014.
I have a question regarding DPO. Would this replace a DPO, or does every company need to have a DPO?
I can answer that. No, it would not replace the DPO. If anything, it would be a tool that your DPO could use to make his job easier. And yes, companies that process personal data, according to the Act so far at least, do require a DPO. I'm not sure if further guidance will come out from the Information Commission as it relates to that, but so far we know that that's a requirement.
Okay. So Nordia was actually asking who should be the DPO, but you're saying that the commissioner will provide more information, right? That's what you're saying?
Yes, will provide information, yes. Usually persons who have experience in data protection, there's a certification, certified information privacy professional, Europe. That's a certification that persons can take, or some DPO services can be outsourced to cybersecurity companies or companies that deal with data privacy and protection. So that's one way that a company can manage getting a DPO is to outsource it to a third-party company.
All right, I don't see any more questions, so I think that is it. But they have shared their information, so you can actually contact them at info@cybersyce.com or at 896-0306. And of course, you can contact them through the SME Resource Center. Thank you so much, guys. It was a very important topic, and you delivered it in such a manner that it was very easy to digest. So thank you for that. Thanks to everyone for coming out. I'm sure that you are leaving here much more prepared for November 30th, which is right around the corner. So make sure that you start planning. If you need any assistance, feel free to reach out to us. But thank you so much for coming out. Enjoy the rest of your night, and we look forward to seeing you next month at our next workshop.
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks.
All right, everyone, do take care,
everyone. Thanks for having
and
us.
looking forward to your feedback.
All right.
Smart business account for SMEs. Being a business owner is a role that changes constantly. At JMMB Bank, we offer a new type of partnership. We understand and care about the unique needs that come with operating a small or medium-sized business by offering flexibility, partnership, and expert advice to support your successful growth. For you, we've created the JMMB Smart Business Account.